don't say a word. Daddy's gonna get you a mockingbird, and if that mockingbird don't sing, Daddy's gonna buy you a diamond ring, and if that diamond ring don't shine, Daddy's gonna gut you and make you mine.
Where am I? What's going on? Who are you?
You don't remember me? How rude. It's your old friend, Strawman Johnmus.
Oh, did we, go to high school together?
What? No, I'm 45.
Really? Well, man, you look great.
Well, thanks, man. It means a lot, you know. I just
Yeah.
Thanks. It really means I try, you know, dermatology stuff.
Good to see someone looking around.
Good shampoos.
It's pretty good.
This is a fucking game. This is a fucking game. I'll slit your fucking throat, bitch. I'll do it.
Okay.
You may not know me, but I know you. Area code of 859, graduating class of 2015 from Woodford County High. Email Darren_doctor@hotmail.com. Social security number 086385955. Confirmed Robofag.
That's not my social security number.
What? I paid that motherfucker $500. Listen here. If you don't pick up this phone within the next hour, your ass is grass. I'm telling you, it's over. You're done. As soon as I get done cutting this fuck up, it's you. You're dead. I'm gonna make sure no one ever finds your body. I'll use your body. I'll eat your body.
Look, man, I'm a smart guy. I figure out when stuff's going on. Kill me now or let me go. Don't waste my time.
I'm not gonna kill you. No. Not yet.
Oh, sorry, that was just the impression I got from that one thing you said about slitting my throat.
For too many years, Harmony Gold apologists and robo-fags like you have went out of their way to defend that bastardized corporation and their satanic cast. But today, I'm gonna make you review the worst piece of media in the entire Robotech franchise.
Robotech Wars.
No!
Aftermath.
No!
Return to Macross?
Hell no!
Variants!
It's not a comic!
The novelizations!
Never speak in vain of McKinley again.
Okay, I'll bite. What's the worst piece of media in the entire Robotech franchise?
The Shadow Chronicles.
Oh yeah, I could understand someone having that point of view.
20 years the Robotech title sits on a shelf and rots, and when it's finally run off, after years of nothing but third-rate comics and copyright claims, we get this misshapen piece of trash that makes Atlantic Rim look like a first edition copy of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
I don't know if that's true, or even if that makes any sense, but it's certainly a film that hasn't been received well by fans of anime or the original show alike. So I think that it's really important that we try to look at where this film hits and misses, and try to assess the full frontal damage, so we can avoid such problems in the future.
Don't defer the fucking topic, Dick Sandwich. This is the worst fucking thing ever. No matter how much you defend Harmony Gold, it will always be their fault.
We start off outside the Earth, in the year 2044, or 2035, if you're going off the 90s timeline that doesn't make any sense. Here we meet the boy who will serve as our main protagonist throughout the film, Marcus Rush, who is doing some sort of check or test flight with his friend when they come across an Invid group and have to hide in the ruins of an old ship. I really dig the visual of so many battle fortresses from previous conflicts littering the outside of the Earth like a ring around Saturn. Obviously, I would have hidden some stuff from the first two sagas of Robotech in there, but that's a nitpick, and it's a really cool idea that's executed pretty okay. As our heroes continue to hide from their enemies, Marcus decides that it's about time to give a flashback exposition dump to the audience.
Hard to believe it all started with a single event that brought robotechnology to Earth.
I mean, there's nothing technically wrong with how they present the history of the universe, but I don't think that it's needed. The first two sagas obviously still exist, but there's no need to recap them because each show, by nature, works as standalone stories. Basically, you could just say, "the future," and the audience would be able to key into everything that they need to immediately comprehend. I don't see why a recap of the Macross saga is currently relevant. The 3D animation in this special may not look that bad at first, but the more that they try to show it off and the more that it takes up the focus of the film, the worse it gets. I mean, on one hand, it's certainly inexcusable that the animation just doesn't look great, but this was 2004 when they did this. Even as recently as a couple years ago, I think that animation studios had a huge problem making 3D work with hand-drawn material. But it's also hard to avoid the fact that when I put the PS2 game up to this, it's hard to remember which one is which. The cell animation also at first looks really nice and professional, but as the film goes on, it starts to look worse and worse. I've done a lot of thinking about it, and I think that the main factor is that a lot of these character designs are just too detailed. You see, most anime lip movements are designed to be vague to allow for easy dubbing, to the point that it's easy to take these clips and put in whatever audio that you want to. Simplicity is key in making this kind of animation work. When mouths are just sort of ovals filled in, you can get away with having them just open and close continuously without any major problems. But when you go out of your way to show every inch and centimeter of the face in full detail, it literally looks like this. Marcus and his friend, who we are going to call Sokka, return to their moon base and have a proto-cola, while one of them ogles a girl working on a fighter.
You gonna address the giant elephant in the room?
That is?
The massive boobers on that thing.
Oh yeah, that's a huge problem with this film. All the female characters are like that. But on the other hand, isn't that like an industry standard at this point?
The humans have assembled their fleet to reclaim their home world. The final assault should begin soon.
Who are these guys?
Excellent. Everything is transpiring as the awareness has foreseen.
Really though, this is the second scene in the film. These are obviously going to be the main villains, I can already tell that. But they haven't even given us enough time to care about the characters that we already have met. How about we just get back to Marcus and develop him a little bit more?
Captain Grant?
Sir?
Alright, or maybe not. This keeps happening throughout the rest of the intro. Every time you get used to hearing the voice of one character, they switch to someone else for 5 minutes before switching to yet another character. Movie, just pick one person to serve as our perspective and develop them. How am I supposed to start caring about the exploits of all these characters when I can't even learn their names?
You call yourself a Robotech fan, but you can't even get the basics right. You don't even know who these people are, you half-wit inbred fuck.
Of course I know who these people are. That's General Reinhardt, that's Vince Grant, that's Sparks, that's not Louis, but they say it's Louis, and that, of course, is Rick Hunter. But this film is clearly supposed to be made in such a way that it can appeal to fans and people new to the franchise. But if you don't know who Rick Hunter is or why you should care about him, this scene is essentially just a bunch of people you barely know talking to a guy who isn't in this movie at all. So the first new guy we barely know puts together a whole crew of people we don't know to find the guy that isn't in this movie. Then we're done with that story for a while.
Any unit, please respond!
Command 1, this is Lieutenant Commander Scott Bernard, 21st Combat Squadron, Mars Division.
I really don't get who this part of the film is supposed to appeal to. I mean, it's set up in such a way that you're not really introduced to these characters or ideas. So if you're a new viewer, you're gonna feel confused, bewildered, and left out. But if you're a fan, it's so bastardized and removed from the original version that it's just gonna annoy you and make you upset at the rest of the film from the get-go. Please untie me. This isn't the same if I'm not flailing my arms around like a maniac.
Shut up.
Just shut up.
This whole section not only doesn't work, but you could literally cut it out and nothing would feel missing. There's a part later on that totally could have made sense as an introduction to Scott, which would not have upset older fans watching the show, and would have made him a lot more mysterious and morally unclear to new viewers. But having this whole part of the film not only ruins that aspect, it takes up a lot of time. We are 20 minutes into this. 20 minutes! We're close to a third of the way through this movie and they're still introducing main characters, and each one has gotten like 5 minutes a pop. Mark Asaka and the rest of the 2 squadrons prepare to head out, during which time this cringy shit happens.
Say, that's a nice little skull on your flight suit there.
Ugh.
Pretty soon the whole force is out and they try to do their best against the Horde. Now the main tactical advantage of the Invid isn't that they're hard to kill, but that there's so many of them that your forces will easily get whittled away before you even get a scratch on their ranks. Thus the main problem is just avoiding being wiped out entirely. To combat this, the forces try their hand at new fighters with new technology, shadow fields that make it harder for the Invid to detect them.
Hey, now that the whole fleet is equipped with shadow technology, the Invid don't stand a chance.
Yeah, but even if they can't see us, that still doesn't mean they can't hit us.
Hey, no way, buddy. No one's gonna hit me.
The fight scenes and mecha battles in this just aren't that fun at all. There's a couple things that make this so. First off, the 3D battles are so slow. The beta and alpha fighters are key to fighting the Invid because they're agile and move quickly. But in this, it's like 2 balloons lightly gliding past one another, and there's not a lot to the battles in the end. It's mainly just an alpha flying up, firing all of its missiles, and then leaving. Like they literally comment about it in the movie.
She's some pilot.
Yeah, well it helps when you've got a beta full of missiles.
No, that's a legitimately good point. Anyone with a bunch of missiles strapped to their fighter would be good at fighting the Invid. Having battle tactics be this boring in a video game is bad. But in a film where we have to watch it over and over again and there's no real involvement of the audience, it's excruciating!
Also, I love how the explosions in this are clearly just green screen stock effects you'd download off YouTube laid over the same shot multiple times. And it's time to play my favorite game. How did this movie ruin a character I like? This edition, Louis Nichols. Louis Nichols is one of the best characters within the original show, or at least within my perception of the program. He had a great design, came across as very down-to-earth, was perfectly casted, and most importantly, he was honestly a really funny dude.
Oh no! This piece of doggone junk! Why me? Why can't somebody else draw the moldy fig for a change?
He reminds me a lot of a more nerdy Rand. It's hard to get into how funny these two were without just forcing you to watch all of the show, but each of them always had the best comment to interject into a scene or moment just to make you flip your chair over in convulsions.
You just can't take that girl anyplace.
Oh, that girl back there, she's the one! Hey, we can't stop just for some girl. By the way, ion guns don't rupture.
Get a job!
So it's honestly upsetting to see Louis lowered to the point of making the same goddamn terrible joke over and over again, as we're supposed to pretend that it's as funny as in the original. Louis also had his intelligence downgraded for this. In the original show, he was easily the smartest person to ever walk across our screens. He was constantly able to one-up every other scientist in the Southern Cross to get to the bottom of how the enemy tech worked. You get moments like this in the film, but you also get strong instances of him acting like a total idiot just so it can be explained to much stupider members of the audience more slowly. The design, ignoring the hard look of the whole film, is exactly what I could ask for. It interprets what made the original work amazingly, yet it seems a lot more adult and well-rounded. The voice, I'm less of a fan of, but I can get why it was avoided. The original performance worked because the actor in question, Emmy-nominated David Milburn, was just that dedicated to creating the character within himself, but I get why his voice in the original show, hoarse and rough like a teenager who isn't totally comfortable with himself, wouldn't work with this modern Louis. But I feel like with a combination of good directing and better writing, you could still have gotten the original actor to fill the role. As a counterpoint, I suppose that from an outsider looking in perspective, Louis in this film does represent most of what I'm talking about. In the most superficial ways, he does match everything on the checklist. He's smart, he finds the solutions to problems faster than anyone else, and he is honestly involved in some scenes that are actually kind of funny. Since this film has such a large cast, it kind of has to make each character simple archetypes, as it just doesn't give itself enough room to build off of them to make them anything more.
Which could have been easily fixed if those hacks at Harmony Gold had just made it a smaller cast.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid point. If they had used less characters or managed their time better, this part of the film would have been a lot less excruciating and a lot more stomachable.
Feel your blood boil.
This film is just trying to be much more than it can be. If this were a full 13-episode anime, they could get away with having so many cast members and such a long story. But this film isn't even 2 hours long. They just don't have time to waste, and they are doing quite a bit of that. So Guy We Barely Know number 2, not Louis, and the rest of the team going to save the guy not in this movie, arrive to discover that a black hole is formed due to the testing of a new kind of weapon made by the Defense Force. They try to rescue the STF-3 but are attacked by an unknown force of ships and are forced to fold out to warn the main fleet about the flaws in their own weapons. Ariel, a character from the new generation and secretly an Invid hybrid, decides to go and meet with the Queen Mother Regis and convinces her to leave the planet after the Regis notes that the new technology used by the humans is like that of the race that had previously hunted the Invid to near extinction. She takes all traces of the Invid voices with her, but also absorbs a large chunk of the protoculture used by the humans, leaving them with limited power. Or at least they say this in the movie, but it doesn't really affect anything about how they operate for the rest of the feature. Marcus and Sokka, you know, the main characters of this movie, are forced to join Skull Squadron after most of their group is killed in action. It is during this that we get our first hint at the main flaws of Marcus as a person. He's extremely xenophobic and untrusting of all things that aren't human.
I'm telling you, Alex, things would be a whole lot better if all those aliens were just wiped out.
Wow. That's actually impressive. Adding this one aspect towards his character, which isn't ideal, immediately makes him seem a lot more grounded in the real world, let alone setting up some real character development for him to undertake. The ship from earlier exits hyperspace, but a few enemy bogies have been caught in the shift. Because of some error in their weapons, the team cannot use their fighters properly and seem at odds end. This is until Scott suddenly appears in the battle to help out. As per usual, it is comedic how quickly this supposedly epic action scene goes by. Okay, let's pretend that this scene was a really big awesome moment with a ton of fanfare. Let's pretend that he took the fighters on firsthand and ripped them to shreds. Maybe a piece of actual Robotech music plays to really pump up the scene. Couldn't you see how this would have been a much better intro for Scott than all of what we've seen so far? For the older fans who have been waiting for the sequel for a while, this would be Scott finally arriving on the journey that he set off to take at the very end of the show. And for newer audiences, it would be an epic introduction that would set up just how cool this guy is supposed to really be. We wouldn't have to be told he's one of the best Robotech pilots. We would have seen this. We wouldn't need it justified that this is someone who should matter. We would just presume it. And when some of the characters start to question his morality later on, that doubt would be present in us as well. I honestly think that a lot of this film really is good, or at least has some good ideas, but the execution is really flawed and the setup is a little more than lackluster. It runs like a movie made by people who had never made a movie before. Scott meets with Marcus on the ship, which is apparently a tearful reunion. You see, Marcus is apparently the brother of Marlene Rush, Scott's fiancée who dies at the start of his storyline, and Marcus hopes that this means that his sister has also survived.
What about Marlene?
I'm sorry, Marcus. She didn't make it. I would have traded my life for hers if I could. I
I think it's really cool that they got the original actor to play Scott for this film, but he really has aged a lot. He sounds a lot less like a disgruntled 20-year-old and a lot more like an elderly Adam West. I also can't avoid the fact that they somehow made his hair more silly and dated, moving from a short military buzz cut to a mullet somehow. Okay, so we are 40 minutes into this film, and they are literally introducing another new character out of the blue. But this is actually alright in the long run, because it at least gives Louis something to do for the next couple of minutes as if he were a real person. Well, sort of.
I find human companionship to be most interesting.
Eventually, the main characters of the film finally all get together in one location and have a drink. Just pause it. This shot of Louis shaking hands with Scott is really something that should get me excited. That is two characters from two different seasons of the show who were never originally intended to exist within the same universe, shaking hands and making physical contact. But Louis doesn't act like Louis, and Scott doesn't look like Scott, so it barely even registers.
For every Invid I've killed, I carved a little notch. Counting the last battle, I've personally killed 29 Invid.
That's,
Not a lot. At this point, Ariel somehow teleports onto the ship and meets with Scott to tell him about the Children of the Shadow and their technology. What follows is a huge long exposition dump, which mainly involves the two standing around in some various holograms. This film features a whole lot of standing around and talking. There's actually not a lot of action or adventure in this film, it's just mainly people talking about the fact that there's action and adventure in this film. Marcus and Sokka walk in on Scott and Ariel when she's being all glowy and mysterious, and a fight occurs. This ends with Scott being interrogated by higher powers in what is some of the best animation in the entire film. Scott warns the higher-ups about the Shadow and an impending attack on a Robotech base. Okay, pro tip, if you're gonna have a piece of information passed along from one character to a second character, and then from the second character to more characters, you only need to show one of those reveals. Preferably the second. Showing both just makes the audience feel like the characters are playing catch-up to the information that they already know about, and it gets stale. So, in other words, Scott is dragged off mysteriously by Ariel. Instead of following their perspective, we stick with Marcus and Sokka, who eventually grow curious after a few minutes and go to check up on him, where they then discover Ariel glowing like an Invid. They fight him and he is taken in and his loyalties are questioned. Then, and only then, he explains what Ariel told him, and the audience is on the same page as everyone but Scott, never getting ahead of the main characters on screen as to feel bored. Also, despite the fact that very little has happened in this film so far, we are currently an hour into this. That's 2/3 of the way through. It is at this point, however, where things at least start to be interesting. The Shadow People start attacking Robotech ships and take quite a few out. I actually really dig these ship designs. They're pretty cool looking and they have this nice layered look to them. It's around here that we also start to rationalize why the Haydenites have turned on the humans. The Haydenites hate and fear all creatures who use protoculture, and they only allied themselves with the humans not only to fight against the larger problem of the Invid, but to also implant tech into the humans' mecha so they could take them over when the war was over. I kinda like this twist. It reminds me of Russia and the US becoming allies just to fight off Germany, and then glaring at one another for decades afterwards.
That's impossible!
Captain?
Prepare to fire synchro cannons!
You know what the lip sync in this is like? It's like that thing they used to do with horses, where they'd put peanut butter on the top of their mouths and then they just dub over whatever they wanted to.
Prepare to fire synchro cannons!
Somehow the enemy's energy wave caused the ship's reflex furnace to overload and then implode.
But that should not happen. According to my data, the shadow dimensional field completely shields the power source of the ship.
Unless there's something wrong with the shadow device.
No! So the second guy we barely know realizes that he has made a mistake in not trusting the person that knows a lot about what's going on. So he puts the other person who knows a lot about what's going on under arrest, and then threatens to do the same to the only person who has served as any help to figure out what's going on. The group evacuates the base being attacked, and Scott and Guy number 2 take 2 Cyclones, which have not been seen or mentioned up to this point and aren't really used even then. While the Cyborg Girl is being taken off to jail, she and the guards are attacked by a group of Haydnite mecha who... just watch.
This further proves that the hacks at Harmony Gold are just talentless gobsmackers who are feeding off the Macross IP like desperate vultures.
What? Shut the hell up, man.
Who was that young Hellcat Smithers?
Sir, one of your drones from Sector 7G.
Seriously, though. That's the highest extent of bad 3D in an old anime film that you could possibly reach. Look at how glossy they made it just to try and make up for the fact that it's an awful model. And look at the goddamn design! What is that? Like a half spider, half monkey? It looks ridiculous, and it's totally impractical. Scott and Guy number 2 suddenly arrive to combat these foes and blast away at the Haydnite, which has arrived with the spider monkeys. This creates one of the most epic shots in the film, which is followed up by one of the most hilariously anticlimactic. With that out of the way, the team heads off to the core reactor, where the Neutron S missiles are held. Their plan is simple and actually well built up by the story so far. They'll detonate the missiles, create a black hole, and leave just as it sucks up the Haydnites. On the battlefield, Sokka is killed by the Haydnites and Mai's fighter is severely damaged as well. Marcus sends Mai to safe ground as he attacks the Haydnites on head first with no backup. Just as the missiles go off and the ship folds away, Marcus finds himself in a white void with his dead sister, who proclaims that it is not his time and that he must keep fighting.
Marlene!
No.
This is Patrick!
Finally returning to Earth, the team decides that they have to set off once again to find Admiral Hunter and return the SDF-3 to the planet.
A mission that will only take another 15 to 20 years to get off the ground.
How are you going to defend this one, robo-fag?
Well, there just aren't a lot of ways to get around it. This is just a bad movie, I'll admit it.
Stacking so many characters into one film means that very few of them end up standing out in the end. The movie is fixated on the fact that the Robotech universe exists, and it overrides itself with the worry of keeping it going, as it holds the burden of the first successfully created animation project since 1985. The film has a lot of good direction, and it's stuffed with pretty alright character designs that I otherwise wouldn't despise. But in the end, The Shadow Chronicles is nothing more than a prequel to a movie that doesn't exist right now. The actual movie that everyone has been waiting for since 1985, which is a film that I wouldn't be shocked to not see for quite a long while. Shadow also fails to understand a lot about Robotech. I mentioned that Louis isn't written right, but he's just one of them. Scott and Marlene also fail to feel anything like the people that they were supposedly just hours before, and Rick looks and sounds so different that as a kid it took me a second viewing to realize that it was even meant to be him at all. In the end though, what really kills this film is pacing. The runtime is about 90 minutes in the end, and it's not until the 40-minute mark that the film is done introducing all the characters that it wants to, and while there are a few scenes that deal with them pretty well, there just isn't enough time to let these things happen naturally. The film does honestly get really good at one point, but it's close to the end and it's constantly being undercut by silly designs and bad animation. Overall, Robotech The Shadow Chronicles just isn't good, and no amount of fan edits or filters is ever going to be able to fix this.
I win, you sniveling cunt!
But let's be a little bit fair.
Sure, the movie isn't good, but I'm shocked to say that there are still elements in it that I like. I think that some of the characters are very memorable, and that they at least strive to do things that you wouldn't expect them to. The narrative isn't broken, and it's surely not that nothing works at all, but rather that the few pieces that really need to work are just sorely missing. Recognizing problems is important, but only so one can work to improve in the future, not so one can decide to retire from the art form entirely.
This was the first movie made by most of these guys. I'll admit it, I've made bad movies in the past. A whole lot of my films are just terrible. But the thing is, I learn from those mistakes. I realize what went wrong. I grow as an artist, and I continue to make better and better things. To judge me or anyone else based off of the failure of one artistic project, I think it would be a bit hasty.
So what you're saying is...
I was right. They all are talentless hacks. This proves now and forever that anything Harmony Gold or Tommy Une ever have done or ever will do is cancer to the community of fans and a scourge to all of humanity. I think all the filmmakers included in this project should be lynched. Wait. When did you get untied?
At some point between Scott Bernard being tied up and the robot girl being tied up.
Well, there's no point. I'm a skilled fighter in all forms of martial arts. Wow! How could you possibly defeat me?
What I should have done from the very beginning. Hello, police.
No, please! Hey, shut up. Hey, as a cop, I have the right to use any amount of force to arrest you. That means I can put you on the ground and beat you down. Are you resisting arrest right now? Get in the car. Get in the car. Tell it to the judge.
No, it was just a prank. You don't get it.
Tell it to
you
the
don't
judge.
get it up.
Yeah, it's really weird how you were locked inside that guy's basement for like a day.
Yeah, now that you mention, I guess it is kind of weird. It doesn't happen all the time, but seems normal in my life right now.
Well, I mean, at least you get to see this guy's comeuppance.
Yeah. Do you notice the best part?
What?
I don't think that's a real cop. To be in love must be the sweetest feeling that a girl can feel. To be in love, to live a dream with someone else you care about like no one else. A special man, a dearest man who...